Okay. There we go. Okay, I think we're live, Rachel.
I think we are too. Great to see you today, Miriam. It's
So good to see you.
not an easy one to get up and get ready for, but here we are. We're doing it.
Quite the day to choose for launching a podcast. We'll say that. So welcome everybody. I know. Where do we start? So I'll start off first by welcoming everybody who is here. Thank you so much for coming to the very first episode of the podcast, where we are challenging systems that are causing harm at work, exploring new ways to lead, and making work feel good. So I'm Miriam. I'm here to support leaders who want to break free from outdated models and build spaces that truly prioritize people over profit. So as a Palestinian woman and a woman of color, I have experienced my fair share of crap in workplaces, harmful practices, the inability to kind of show up fully as myself. And as a result, I decided to make a big change and go out on my own and actively try to change these problems that are affecting all of us. So here we are. Today, I have Rachel Kimber here with me, and we're going to dive into fractional work, AI, and how these two things are shaping the future of work right now. So we would both love to hear your thoughts. If you have any thoughts, drop them in the comments. We hope you have a lot of thoughts and a lot of aha moments. Any questions, drop them in the comments as well. We are going to answer the questions at the very end. So bear with us. And if you are watching the replay, we will still engage with you after the live. So please feel free to drop your comments below. And with that, I would love to welcome Rachel. Hey, Rachel.
Hello, everyone. I also feel like I should introduce myself more completely. I'm zooming in from Peekskill, New York, on the lands of the Lenape and the Wappingers and the Mohegan. I'm a biracial woman and mother. And I think that really started to frame my thinking around fractional, because my entire day is broken into itsy bitsy teeny little fractions. If I am not doing something productive to keep the day moving with 2 children and a household to run, something is going to go sideways. And when things do go sideways, like a kid gets sick, it makes it really challenging. Or when I get sick, it makes it really hard to, keep up with what is, the capitalistic structures that mean you don't slow down, you don't stop, you just do your 40 hours. And so when Miriam and I started talking about a fractional future, it just made a lot of sense to the way I'm already running my day to day, which is roughly, it looks like I do kid drop off from like 7 to 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock, get to the desk and sit down, crank out as much as I can before the kids start coming home at like 2:30, 3 o'clock, like really early. There's not a lot of time to feed myself and, be productive. And so then I realized, well, I want to spend time with my children. And so I would take that break until after dinner, after bedtime sometimes, and then come back to the laptop and say, there's things that I need to finish. There's stuff I want to complete, but that I can't do it in a 9 to 5 box. Like it just doesn't work with my schedule. And so finding employers, finding partners, finding collaborators that understand that, like there's no opportunity for me as a woman of color to not deliver, right? That's just, it doesn't happen. I aspire towards excellence. I deliver excellence, but to give each other the flexibility and the space to get it done in the timeline that is reasonable for all the responsibilities that we carry.
Right. I love that. And what I'm hearing you say is you are a human being and not a machine. And hence you need the flexibility to...
I lost sound, Miriam.
Oh, you lost my sound? Uh-oh. Can you hear me? Right. What I'm hearing you say is you are a human being and not a machine. And hence you need the flexibility to...
So funny, Miriam.
Oh, you lost my...
It's funny because it's coming through on LinkedIn Live. And so I heard you. Yes, flexibility.
Okay.
because there's a little delay on LinkedIn Live. So always technology troubleshooting. But we are having a little bit of sound
Okay.
trouble between the two of us. So
Can you
jump
hear me
in,
now,
say
Rachel?
something so I can verify that I can hear you.
It sounds like you still can't hear me, so that's not good. Let me see here what I can do. 1 second.
An idea. We type questions into the chat because I think the LinkedIn Live crew can hear you, but for some reason,
You can't.
I'm not hearing you.
Tough to have an interview
Totally
when
bizarre.
the interviewee can't hear the interviewer. I don't actually know what to do. So let's see. Give me 1 second.
Because I think the LinkedIn Live crew can hear you, but for some reason,
You can't.
I'm not hearing you.
Tough to have an interview when the interviewee can't hear the interviewer.
It's so funny, Miriam. I can hear you on LinkedIn Live. So with a bit of delay, I'll catch up.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Let's try this and see how it is for everyone else. So apologies for the technical difficulties. I did tell the world this is going to
Want
be
me to
an
leave and pop back in?
Oh, you know what? Let
Yes.
me try that. Let me try that.
Thumbs up on that one?
1 sec.
I'll give it a try.
How are we doing, Rachel? Can you hear me?
I can. All better.
Yay! Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you everyone for bearing with us. I hope you're all still here.
And we just demonstrated flexibility,
There you go.
real-time troubleshooting. Like I think, when we have these moments, like that's part of the real world and figuring out how you navigate and roll through it. Like that's real life.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's what I was trying to say in the response to your message was, or like your intro was that I'm hearing you say like I'm a human being and I have a lot of different responsibilities and a lot of things going on in my life. And hence naturally work becomes fractional. It's not that we try to make it fractional, it just is fractional. And the longer we fight that, the harder it is for all of us to adjust to real life and just be in life as it is, as we know it, right?
And I think especially as, someone my age in their 40s who have parents who are aging, who have children who are still needing a lot of time, energy, and attention and will for the next decade, right? And God bless if my parents live for another couple decades, that would be a blessing. But that's putting more burden on
Yep.
individual humans who also want to participate in the workforce. So how do we start to find that spaciousness so that we can be productive, contributing humans, but then we can also take care of all the other responsibilities that are maybe more important, if not just as important, right? Caring for our parents and caring for our children. Like those are
Critical.
big jobs, big responsibilities. Yes.
Right. And it's almost like, we're weighing out capitalism with the rest of life at the end of the day, right? And so obviously we live in a capitalistic society. We need to work to make money to survive and do all the things. But at the same time, it's like values wise, the other things matter more, right? There are relationships, our connections, our community, those types of things, our health. My goodness, where do we start?
Yes.
Right?
And I think that's one of the things that we see in this election is like, what does community mean?
Mm-hmm.
What does relationship mean? And so I think it's really powerful to reflect on, what are the values? What are those definitions? Because then it helps us, have a broader understanding of how to navigate this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So again, I don't want to get too far into it, but I want to really think about what does it mean to live in a capitalist society? What does it mean to work in the social sector and prioritize relationship? What does it mean to need to earn an income and then also show up for those values, for those people, for those communities that you care deeply about? And I think that's where the fractional comes, because for me, the North Star isn't money.
Right.
It's not just about cranking out my 40 hours, taking home that paycheck, buying a fancier car and a fancier TV.
Yeah.
For me, I wrote on Substack, like I live in a kind of shitty house and a kind of shitty, right? It's not, the glossy, beautiful picture of capitalism. And I love it. It's what makes my heart happy. It's what aligns with my values. And so finding the space to be fractional where I can earn enough money to support, to care for, to grow and thrive, but for that not to usurp the other things that I care deeply about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when you and I first connected, we brought these two sides together of this, fractional nature of work and then the human-centered nature of work. And they really overlap. If we actually start prioritizing people and humanity, naturally we would move towards a more fractional future. So let's chat first. I do want to hear about what your ideas of a fractional work future is. But before that, maybe we can backtrack a tiny bit and hear a little bit about your story personally and how you landed here, like doing your own thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like I got a head start with the power privilege dance because I grew up in a Westchester suburb outside of New York City. And that means that I grew up very poor, but very adjacent to people with lots of power and lots of privilege. And so it kind of opened my eyes early to what that imbalance looks like. And then I felt called to the nonprofit space, right? I wanted to do my part to lift up people who otherwise don't have access or don't have that power and privilege that I grew up around. And I didn't particularly have access to either, but I understood how that game worked. And so wanting to figure out how do we empower these communities, I found my way into philanthropy. And it's another seat of power and privilege. It's another area where social impact and mission is what drives the work. And it gave me really ample opportunity to dive into who am I? What are my values? How do I want to show up in the world? Often because the organizations I worked at had those conversations about the organizational entity, right? Like, what's our strategy? Who are we helping? Where are we investing our limited resources? How are we good stewards? And so I took those enterprise level conversations and drilled them down into who am I? What am I doing? And what's my strategy? And so sometime during the pandemic, home with an 18-month-old and a 3-year-old, my world became what I called then decompartmentalized, right? There was no, I'm dropping the children off and I'm starting my work. It was, I have an entire day to get through with my children, with my work, with my community, with COVID. Like, it was just incredible. And I think it gave me an opportunity to even drill deeper into what are my values? If I only have this much time in a given day, how do I want to be spending that time? And no, it's not sitting at my computer while my children are over there screaming and, ripping apart the house. I want to have time with them. I want to enjoy this unfortunate opportunity that was called COVID that meant I was trapped at home with my very young children for a number of years. But it also gave me a new lens on who am I as a professional? How do I want to be sharing my talent, my expertise, my 20 years of research on a sector? How do I want to show up? And so when I started asking myself those questions, it became more and more clear to me that the 40-hour work week wasn't going to fit what that picture was for me. Right. And so, Miriam, we've talked a little bit about what does it look like to start reinventing the workplace. Yeah. And I think the fact that women, caregivers, mothers are not wanting to give up their professional responsibilities and just, take care of the household or the home, the children, and figure out a way to do both really well means that we sacrifice, right? I sacrifice sleep. I sometimes sacrifice my health. But what that means is that I get to participate as a full professional and as a full mom. And I wish that, Miriam, as we are driving this conversation, that more and more workplaces could make space for us to be able to do both really, really well.
Right. And I think that's where the fractional work comes in. If we, as like the people could adjust to this idea of fractional work, and companies and organizations can do it too, what would that look like? So let's dive into that a little bit. What does fractional work look like for you? I think people are seeing more often this idea of a fractional executive or fractional roles in general. I think it's more common these days. I still wouldn't say it's completely quote unquote normal or accepted or the way that we do things, but what does it mean? What do you think it could mean in the future? How can it lead us in a very different direction than what we're experiencing today?
Great question, Miriam. And I think I almost want to step back and kind of define fractional,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't know if you want to take that. It's The Future is Fractional podcast. And so if you want to
Go for
define
it, Rachel. That's actually a quote. That was a quote of yours. The future is fractional. And I just jotted it down.
Oh, gosh. I think what we mean by fractional is that we're able to put our expertise in really specific places, maybe for really specific periods of time or for ongoing relationships, but not as a full-time seat. And I think where the vision came from is recognizing how lean nonprofits are, how they can't hire a full-time CTO, Chief Technology Officer. Yeah. Well, how are we navigating the chaos that is AI and digital transformation if you don't have a full-time chief C-suite level person who can help navigate and set strategy, right? Who has the expertise, who has the depth of knowledge, and who also comes with a really high price tag, right?
Yeah.
Nonprofits can't afford that. COO, CFO, CTO, CIO, right? There's a lot of people who could be sitting in the C-suite to help drive these organizations. The board has some responsibility, but to help set strategy and to do it for limited periods of time or, as a managed services package, right? We do that with technology now. I don't know how to update my Salesforce. I'm going to outsource it to somebody who is expert and has that depth of knowledge. And yes, it comes with the price tag, but it's less expensive than keeping someone in-house. Yeah. Of course, there's trade-offs, Miriam, because if we're going into the fractional, more gig work image, what happens with benefits? What happens with company culture? And that's why I think the social sector is really well positioned to tackle that, because we have already experimented as small, lean staffs in collective resources, right? Intermediary organizations, physically sponsored organizations. And so I think it just makes so much sense to be thinking about what do we need, for how long do we need it? How do we develop the strategy and then not have to have somebody for 6 months that we're not using after we start executing on a strategy? So I think the future is fractional certainly has promise, but there's also peril if we don't figure out, how do we take care of and maintain culture when we are a lean organization who's looking to a fractional CTO to come in and help and support.
And do you have thoughts on how or who would be the right person or the right role to be able to manage something like that? Would that role, for example, have to be a full-time role so that it could have that continuity, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I think in particular the C-suite, because those roles come with such a high price tag and it takes such a level of expertise. I think that's a really important area to be looking at. Where are we understaffed? Where do we not have the knowledge? And I think especially with technology right now, it's complicated. It's big. It's not something that folks in our sector generally come in with. We don't have a lot of data science degrees or engineering degrees at our, youth homeless organizations, right? Or our, Feed the Hungry, whatever it is, refugee care. If we have scientists, they're usually really specific area scientists, not necessarily data generalists who can come in and help us build strategy. Right. So I think when we're looking at any kind of a strategic development, we would want to bring someone in who isn't necessarily a consultant, right? That might be too far away, too one-off, but to bring someone in who you want to have an ongoing relationship with. And that's where I point to things in technology where we have managed service plans, or we have a COO on retainer, right? Legal counsel on retainer. And so I think as we realize how much we need that expertise at nonprofits, at lean organizations, we're going to need to look to this fractional model to get that expertise to perhaps come in, set a strategy, understand our culture, and then have a touch point again in 6 months and say, okay, how are you doing? I care about your organization. I'm not on the board. I'm not a full-time staff person. And I just want to share my expertise to help you reach these strategic objectives that you're trying to hit.
Yeah, it really, for sure, as with everything, there are complications and challenges that will come with it. But I also see such opportunity with this model because it also provides this possibility for people, especially leaders. I mean, they don't even have to be parents or caregivers. It's just people who want to balance their well-being, their health, their relationship. As you said, like, as we get older, we have more responsibilities on our plate. Or forget that, even if it's a choice, like if it's just a choice that you want to make for yourself, that you want to work less, you want to hone in on your genius zone, you want to do what you do best only. That's something I strongly believe in. And then have the biggest impact you could possibly have. So it opens up these opportunities for leaders to shift the way they work, to serve in a greater capacity, and still live kind of in alignment with their own values and the lifestyle that they want to have. Right?
Absolutely. And I think especially as we look towards some of the folks who might be aging out of the 40-hour work week, right? There's plenty of boomers with decades of expertise. We're going to lose that expertise, right? Things like fundraising and development. They might not be able to use AI, but they know how to create a strategy and a campaign, right? So you put those two things together with some associate in fundraising with a, fractional CDO, Chief Development Officer, and you have a real powerhouse team there and not at a high price tag.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge, is like, where do we find ways to think differently so that we can keep driving the mission and not start to inflate the budget?
Right. Yeah, I love that. And this is one of the things I think I've mentioned to you that I love about you, is the way that you see these connections and can create things out of nothing. Like, you can look into the future and, completely disconnect from the way we've done things before in the past and find new ways, and like these new ways to connect old things that create new things altogether. And I just love that. And I love that that's where all of our conversations have gone. And you mentioned AI in your last example. And so let's bring that into the conversation.
Yes.
And how you and I have had some really cool conversations around AI. And I just let's bring that forward here a bit and say, how is it impacting us now? And what could it mean for the future of work?
Yes. And I think that's kind of the magic of this moment, is that we can't be good at all the things all the time. And I think AI is making us feel like we either need to be good at all the things all the time with AI, or we're redundant and obsolete and we're going to lose our job.
Yeah.
And I think that example that I just gave of like a boomer who has no interest in touching the AI LLM machine, right? That's fine. That's an absolute valid point of view. There were plenty of, the greatest generation who decided, I don't want to touch the computer, not my jam, right? I survived World War I, World War II, right? I don't need anything new in my life, right? Yeah. So making space for those boomers who are like, no, thank you. I've done my decades of, learning how to use the new tools, but you pair someone like a CDO up with a newer person to the sector, and you say, let's solve problems together. Let's bring this knowledge together. And guess what? It works because we've set boundaries, right? So Miriam, I talk a lot about, like, you build that box, right? What does that box look like? Well, the associate wants to be in the office. She wants to have an opportunity to engage, wants to network, new in their career, wants to learn the things. The CDO wants to sit on a beach in Florida and sip Mai Tais for 40 hours of the week. But like every couple, they'll check in, they'll say, what's up? Like, let me help advise you. Let me share what I learned over the last couple decades. You plug it into AI and you figure out what to do with it. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think as we have that AI fear reaction, is to double down on, Miriam, you called me a problem solver, a solutions finder. Like, that's what we're doing. And so I had a random conversation with a UPS driver, because I talk to everyone all the time. And I asked him, how is AI affecting your UPS truck delivery journey, or where would you guys use it? And he had some really wonderful insight. Again, front line, people know what they need. And he's like, I would like to see AI get more efficient at packing the truck. Right? That's the thing that takes the longest time. I show up when my shift starts, that truck needs to be ready to go.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so you get AI to pack the truck, but now you've got this wonderful, matrix thing that tells the people how to put the things into the truck. What do you do? Because now you're going to be the backlog. And I was like, wait a minute. This is weaving things together. I've seen in the movies where the drones come and do the deliveries, right? So, hey, delivery truck driver, your job's going to go away. So what's the solution, right? Like, how do we think this scenario as far through as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you have 2 guys packing the truck now so that the
Right.
drones can get the things out faster. And now you hire an engineer to get that truck packing algorithm like even better, right? So nobody's lost the job. It's just changing
Right.
what that looks like within this new boundary set that we've created.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's so interesting when you think about it like that from like an efficiency perspective. Because I think it's really reassuring. I think that's where a lot of people have the fear that their jobs will disappear. And it's easy to imagine how your job will disappear, right? When it comes to something like efficiency. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of the other areas where I find it really challenging to imagine how AI would replace us as human beings is the actual human element of work. Feelings, yes. Emotions, you know, that problem solving piece. If you've worked with AI already, you know, AI will just give you like a summary of what's been done before. It's not going to think anything new for you. Those new ideas have to come from you. And right. Then you can workshop it with AI, right? But it's yes. Like, it's really interesting to think about the opportunities there and what people need to lean into yes. In order to have, you know, a career that's fulfilling and, you know, gives them what they want.
Absolutely. And I think at this stage, AI can't replace the relationship component very well. Mm-hmm. And that's something that the social sector runs on. We run on relationships, we run on care, community, shared values. And I think we can use AI to accelerate our drive towards social impact. I think there's a lot of really wonderful use cases that increase efficiency. Mm-hmm. I think what's going to be really exciting to see next is where we move from efficiency to engagement, right? Yeah. Where we're talking to each other through these tools and learning better, right? So that's the really big push in our sector right now is, are we collecting data for accountability or are we collecting it for learning?
Right.
And again, given this moment that we're in right now, where we're seeing the results of whatever we've done for the last however long, right? This is that moment where we have made a decision as a country. What do we learn?
Yeah.
How do we act more precisely? And how do we do that both with our human intuition, our human expertise, our personal zones of genius?
Yeah.
And then collaborate with AI to move it a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I love that. I love that so much. And I'm thinking too, in terms of like, I'm really tempted to go on a little bit of a tangent here.
Please, love them. Love tangents, Miriam. Go for it.
Yeah, and just AI and kids and the future of work for our children and like how this all connects. We've been getting in the habit of using ChatGPT for everything, like essentially as a replacement for Google.
Yes.
And we use the voice mode. And so my kids are like, you know, my son yesterday said to me, why do humans get electrocuted by power lines, but birds don't? And so I'm like, I don't know. Let me ask ChatGPT. So, you know, they're getting into the habit of learning, okay, I have this information at such accessibility. It's at their fingertips, even more than what Google has been for us, right?
Yes. And they don't have to spell, right? I have little
exactly.
children. They don't have to type or spell anything. They just talk to the machine.
Exactly. And they get like really good, solid information in an instant. I've used it to help me identify birds that I've seen. Like, yes. These are the characteristics of birds. Like, what could this be, you know? And so, you know, my kids are now asking for ChatGPT. Like, they want the app for themselves that they can access. So how you being a futurist, you being a person who can like envision possibilities much more than I can, I think. How do you see this like possibly playing out?
Yes. So on your LinkedIn post, Miriam, I typed what kind of pinged this fractional thinking. And so I'll share that story really briefly and get you all thinking about what is possible in the future. So living with young people, I get this constant lens into what is in their ecosystem, what are they touching and engaging with. And one of those things is like roadblocks, Minecraft, right? They're in there all the time. And so one day, again, small little rabbit hole here, I missed a call. One call was double booked. I don't know how I managed to do it, but I ended up on the call that was related to income versus the call that was just a conversational exploratory call. So I ended up in the right call. It was wonderful, right? I didn't get that wrong. But at the end of the day, I was thinking about this tool called Basecamp, which I was using to help kind of project manage and see what I need to do and check the boxes and put reminders in. And I was thinking about that word as it relates to war places, right? You have the map on the table and you're prioritizing what your next moves are. And I was like, if I had a tool for that, my tool would have told me which meeting to go to.
Yeah.
Right? My tool would have been able to help me prioritize. And then I started imagining, again, really big rabbit hole here, guys, if we actually had our own professional base camp where every day we came in and we said, right, you set the parameters. This is how much I want to earn this year. These are the kinds of projects I want to take on. These are the people I want to work with. And you put all of that data into some kind of a tool. And then every day it's in real time helping you make decisions about how you prioritize your 40 hours, right? Or your, 24 hours, whatever it is that you need broken down into manageable chunks, but that also ties to that outcome metric, right? I want to have time to exercise. I want to run a marathon, right? Like that's back on, God bless me if it's back on my radar. I'm using it as an example. I haven't done marathons in a decade. Don't know if I'm getting back there. But I could, right? I could say within this fractional picture that I'm trying to create into one whole, I'm only one person. I can't be everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
How do I fit these priorities in? And I was like, to realize that I didn't have to do that in my own brain, that I could build the algorithm, right? I could set the logic rules that says, if my child has a school concert, block my calendar.
Right.
If I need to make a dental appointment, remind me to schedule it, block the day. That week I'm traveling, make sure I have time to prep that presentation before I'm traveling, right? All of these use cases that kind of land on our plates every day.
Yes.
Imagine we could do
an emotional labor.
Yes.
Like you're essentially saying there could be an app or a tool that could replace our mental and emotional labor. That sounds lovely.
Right? I mean, the dream of every caregiver, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Household runner.
Yeah, exactly.
So Miriam, there's the idea. We just pitched it. If any VCs are listening, please help us build it. Happy to support.
Yeah, I love it. And that's the kind of thing that I really, I mentioned to you last time we talked. I have a hard time. I consider myself somebody with a big imagination and I am a visionary, but still there are limits to that. And I think that there's definitely like a wall where I can't see like beyond it. And I would love to, and I get a glimpse of that with you in our conversations.
Oh, thank you, Miriam.
I just love that. I love that. And so coming back to I think we went on a little bit of a detour, but coming back to my detour before the second detour, of just like the kids and future of work and AI. Like, do you think that we're going to have a completely different setup of work by the time our little ones get into the workplace in about, 15, 20 years?
There was a movie I watched back in the early 2000s, and it was called like Earth 2040, something like that. And it was half documentary, half cartoon. And it did this beautiful illustration of what my generation and the children that I'm raising now will likely experience. And one of the biggest takeaways, and one of the reasons I don't think too hard about paying for college, is that that's probably going away, right? Like that's probably not going to be the way that my children are educated by the time they are college aged. And so what is likely, based on this documentary predictive story, is that my children will likely be EMS drivers and nurses, climate change responders, right? I'm standing in New York in November and it's almost 80 degrees outside.
Yep.
So we have a rapidly changing picture ahead. And I'll pop the link in when I find it, Miriam. But that movie, I think, really influenced the way I have thought about the trajectory we're on and what the future for the children that are coming up now might look like. I'm also really passionate about AI inclusion and policy development because we saw what happened with social media. We didn't regulate. We handed the children iPhones and Instagram and said, good luck. We now have real problems with social, emotional wellness. And that is a direct result, directly correlated to what the rollout of social media happened to some people.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to explore kind of, it's exciting to think about the possibilities and what could be. And it's also pretty scary to think about, you know, how bad things could get, because things are pretty bad now in a lot of ways. And so, so what are the problems of the future that our kids will be solving, right? Like we as entrepreneurs, you and I are really focused on problems that we can solve. That's how we think as entrepreneurs. And it just makes me really wonder about the future, especially of work and the problems that will exist. So that's fascinating. When you find that that movie or documentary, please do share.
I will. Thank you so much for chatting, Miriam. This has been so much fun.
Of course.
Your first podcast episode.
Thank you. You really inspired me to just go with it, as imperfect as it's going to be, and hence the technical difficulties. And it's okay. We'll figure things out.
As long as it aligns with your values. One of mine is joy. As long as you are feeling joyful on the journey, like, go for it. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's wrap up. Rachel, do you have one kind of final takeaway you would love for people to walk away with in their back pocket, maybe something that they can apply related to our conversation?
I think especially with AI, if you haven't tried it, if you have some fear around it, now is the time to explore. Don't delay. That example I gave previously of the greatest generation and the computer, or my parents and the iPhone, right? You see what it looks like to feel clunky and awkward with new technology. And so if you want to avoid that, like, just start and get schooled up on it, do some research, figure out how it might help you in your workflows, but don't ignore it. That's not going to help your fractional future at all.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. That's perfect. Thank you so much for this conversation, Rachel. You, as always, have been a joy to talk to, sparking all kinds of creative ideas in my brain. So I hope that you've done the same. I'm sure you have, for everyone who has listened and watched. And for everybody who is here catching us live or catching us on the replay, thank you for watching. Thank you for engaging. Please continue to leave your comments, your questions. I will check very briefly, quickly, to see if we have any questions. But I appreciate you so much. I think that, okay, we do have one question, so I'll pause there. Oh, this was like 20 minutes ago. It says, also, what happens to continuity and knowledge transfer internally? I could put it up.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and that's where AI is an awesome tool to help with that. That's where you do want to have full-time staff, right? Like, you can't run a nonprofit fully fractional, but that's where, messages around culture and values and clear strategy. If there's a clear strategy, I think there's less risk for a lack of continuity. Many nonprofits don't take the time to develop strategy, though. So it's really hard to maintain continuity when full-time people turn over. So fractional isn't even an issue here. It's the nonprofit space needs to change to mitigate turnover. Right. How do we mitigate turnover?
Yeah.
Maybe fractional is the answer.
Yeah, you know what? That's a whole other episode. We could go into the issues in the nonprofit sector that need to be addressed, right? That cause these problems. So, and they also added, you already addressed it. It's funny, I can't see on this platform who the LinkedIn user is. It just says LinkedIn user. So I apologize that I can't address you by your name.
Well, thank you for asking the question. We're here anytime for you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
And if you like this conversation and want to join future calls, please tune in to this episode to the show every Wednesday at noon. So thank you so much. Have an amazing day.
Bye, friends.